Good evening and welcome to the public meeting for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application for 9 Windward Drive. Before we begin, I would like to provide the land acknowledgement. Niagara Region and Grimsby are situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations such as the Hattaway-Wendarong, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. The premise of this public meeting is to provide the opportunity for the public to provide input on the proposed application. I would like to stress that there have been no decisions or recommendations made by council or planning staff on these applications. This meeting is conducted in accordance with the town's procedural bylaw. All participants are asked to conduct themselves with decorum and respect and provide the opportunity for all members of the public to express their opinion in an environment of tolerance on all points of view and free of intimidation. The intent is to create a venue to encourage people to participate in the process and provide their input. If a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of the Council of the Town of Grimsby to the Ontario Land Tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Grimsby before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is adopted, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Grimsby before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is adopted, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal, unless in the opinion of the tribunal there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party. With us this evening is Stacy Kuriskowski, MHBC Planning, and Oz Colonel, MHBC Planning. Planning staff in attendance are Michaela Bray, Planner, and Walter Basic, Assistant Director of Planning. Tonight we will start with staff providing a brief presentation outlining the process and the application. Next, the consultant team will provide an overview of the proposal, and that will be followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions. If you have not already done so, please ensure that you have signed in so you'll be informed of future meetings on this proposal. As we navigate the virtual public meeting, we ask all participants for your patience. Each participant will be called in order and be provided 10 minutes to speak. Each presenter may speak only once. If you hear your comment presented by someone else, please do not duplicate the remarks. All of the comments are being recorded and will be taken into consideration. When you are called, we ask that you state your name and address. Persons addressing council should confine their remarks to the business at hand and shall direct their comments or questions to the chair. Staff are taking notes of all the questions asked this evening. At the end of the delegations, the consultant will be asked to respond to all of the questions and or comments raised. If you feel that your questions have not been responded to this evening, you can email our planning department at planning@grimsby.ca. Michaela, welcome to give your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. Good afternoon, Mayor Jordan, councillors, and members of the public, applicants and agents. My name is Michaela Bray, planner with the Town of Grimsby. I just want to thank everybody for coming to the public meeting tonight. The applications to be discussed tonight are the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for the site known as 9 Windward Drive. So as Mayor Jordan touched upon, the meeting agenda for tonight will start with a planning department presentation, followed by the applicant presentation being done by MHBC Planning. Then we will hear from any delegates that have registered, and then followed by a question and comment period. So just to go over the purpose of tonight's meeting. So a public meeting is a statutory requirement under Ontario's Planning Act. The purpose of it is just to provide an overview of the planning process and how members of the public can get involved, as well as provide an overview of the planning and regulatory framework and rules that are in place. It also presents an opportunity for the applicant to share information and details about the proposal, and it gives an opportunity for the applicant as well as town staff to answer any questions, as well as listen and take away any feedback. So I'll just go over why plans and bylaws are able to change. So the Ontario Planning Act, it gives authority to applicants to submit applications to the town that don't necessarily meet the current official plan or zoning bylaw. And under the Act, the town is obligated to process these applications. So when they're evaluated, the official plan and zoning bylaw can only be changed if the proposed changes still comply with the overall intent of the official plan and result in development that is compatible with the surrounding area and neighborhood. So I'll just go over a timeline of how the planning process has gone so far for this application. So back in July 2022 was the first pre-consultation meeting. So this was an opportunity for the applicants, their agents, to meet with various town staff and departments, as well as external agencies such as Conservation Authority, like MTO, Niagara Region. There's quite a few external agencies that are present. And at that time, each agency or department outlines what submission requirements they would need to receive to do a fulsome review of the application. So once the applicant has prepared all the requested submission documents, and these are such as plans, drawings, reports, they'll make a formal submission to the town. So we received the formal submission on December 22nd, 2022. And when we receive it, planning staff works to deem it complete. Once it's complete, it'll be circulated to the public on the town's website, so on the current planning applications page. And it's also circulated to all the various agencies for them to do a technical review of the submission and review the plans, studies, reports that they requested. Following that, there was an open house back on February 27th. That was the first meeting for the applicant to share the information and have the public be present. Similarly, the public meeting provides the same sort of platform for the applicant to provide information about the application, as well as for the public to be present to ask questions and provide feedback. So once we're done the statutory meeting, there will still be further kind of revisions or updates to the application depending on the feedback received. And once satisfied that the feedback has been attended to, planning staff would prepare a staff recommendation report, and that would go to council for an eventual decision. And then not shown on this timeline, depending on the decision, there could be appeals. So I want to note that it is a public process, and we do encourage residents to tell us what they think. There's multiple avenues for doing this. So one is writing a letter or an email to the planning department, planning@grimsby.ca. And we also note that you could send a copy of this letter to your ward councillor. And then we also note that you can stay informed. You can provide us with your mailing address or your email address. And by doing so, you'll get notice of future meetings, information on how to receive reports, information on speaking in front of committee or council, and information on how you could appeal the decision. So I'll just give a brief overview of the proposed development, but I'll leave the details to MHBC Planning to present. So on this slide here is a rendering of what's proposed for 9 Windward Drive, and you'll notice it's contextual rendering showing the massing of other nearby buildings and structures on other lots. So what the applicant is proposing is for a 10-story mixed-use building on the subject lands. There'd be 14,260 square meters of residential floor space, and that would make up 121 units, and 1,926 square meters of employment floor space. And therefore, the total proposed gross floor area for employment would be 11.9%. For parking, 250 parking spaces are proposed in the development, and this would be a combination of surface and 2 levels of underground parking. Just going over some of the policies in the official plan that talk about amending the plan. So the official plan, section 1.4.3 reads, "It's not intended that this plan be amended unless substantial evidence can be presented which will justify such an amendment is based on good planning." And then further, section 1.4.4, "In determining whether or not an amendment to the plan is appropriate, regard shall be had to the vision, municipal structure, goals, objectives, and policies under section 2, as well as the policies, study requirements, and evaluation criteria within the respective land use category under section 3, and the implementation policies found in section 9. So to go over the official plan amendment proposed, so currently the site is designated as a mixed-use, high-density with an employment overlay. So the mixed-use high-density, it provides a mix of different uses such as residential, commercial, and employment, and it's shown in the red color. You'll notice there's the employment overlay, which is that blue cross hatching. And the purpose of that employment overlay, which was the result of implementing a secondary plan, the purpose is to reserve the lands for employment generating uses. And I will note that the overlay deals with just the use, but the underlying mixed-use high-density design and other policies would still apply to the site. So the applicant isn't proposing to change from these designations. They still propose to honor the spirit of that overlay, and they are requesting that the amendment be to allow residential uses in that employment overlay as well. So I'll go through the zoning bylaw. So, yeah, right now the current zoning is the neighborhood development zone, ND. It does have one site-specific policy that permits the sales center of a modular home company. So the neighborhood development zone in the official plan, it only recognizes the as-existing uses as the standards that are permitted. So what the applicant is proposing is to rezone to a mixed-use high-density residential with modified standards to I'm forgetting the word, but to accommodate, I guess, for the building that they're proposing. So the specific modifications is that they would permit some additional uses on the property from those that are already permitted. So already permitted uses include an accessory showroom, clinic, convenience store, fitness studio. Oh, sorry, these would be the ones that they'd be adding, excuse me. So they would be looking to add permitted uses of an accessory showroom, clinic, convenience store, fitness studio, food store, pharmacy, and retail store. And to note what is already permitted, it includes uses such as an apartment building, hotel, office, as well as some accessory uses such as banquet facilities, restaurants, theaters, and townhouses in conjunction with an apartment building on the site. They're also proposing some amendments to the lot, building, and yard provisions. So one of them being a reduction in the required minimum front yard, as well as a reduction in the minimum interior side yards and rear yard for underground parking. However, I will note that as part of the ongoing planning review, this has been deemed like potentially unnecessary, as our zoning bylaw reads that the required yard shall be open and unobstructed by any structure from the ground to the sky. So that doesn't include underground. They're also proposing an increase in the maximum permitted building width. They're also looking to permit a standardized parking rate. And that in particular, it would be a standardized rate of 1.5 spaces per residential unit, 1 space per 28 square meters of employment gross floor area, as well as a reduction of 1 contributing accessible space. However, I will note that there are 2 non-contributing accessible spaces that are in the MTO setback. And that's all I have. Thank you. And we'll hear from the applicants at MHBC from Oz Kamal. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michaela, and welcome, Oz and Stacy.
You can hear me okay? Great.
Yes.
So good evening, and thank you for attending the statutory public meeting for the development at 9 Windward. My name's Oz Kamal. I'm a partner at MHBC Planning. I'm joined with Stacy Kurzakowski, senior planner at MHBC Planning. We have the ownership, members of the ownership group here. We have Anthony Rial and Justin Lemieux Rial from Reelson Tealco. We also have the project architect, Magnus Clark, and we have our traffic consultant, Aaron Wignall from Croziers. So they better not have questions. In terms of our agenda tonight, what we're going to do is talk about the site's location, provide an overview of the area context, just a general slide on surrounding developments, where we are with the process to date, and where we see it going. An overview of our proposal, along with the amendments to the official plan and zoning bylaw. We'll also highlight the required studies. We'll show you some conceptual renderings as well, similar to what you saw from Michaela, and then open to questions. So general site location, it's located on the north of the QEW, west of Casablanca Interchange. Site is approximately 1.43 acres in size with 90 meters of frontage on Windward Drive. The site is currently vacant, but as Michaela had previously noted, it was a sales center for model homes. They were removed in September 2022. Next slide, please. In terms of surrounding area context, subject lands are in an area with a variety of uses undergoing significant growth and transformation. To the north, opposite Windward Drive, there's a mixed-use development currently under construction. When I drove by today, it looked like it was almost complete. I think they're still under construction in terms of the surrounding area, but it looked like a 20-story building there. To the east, abutting the subject lands is a 4-story hotel. Beyond that is an office building with an office building to the east of us, about 5 stories, and a new and further east is more residential development. To the south is the QEW, and beyond that are commercial and employment uses such as the car dealership and industrial buildings. To the west, abutting the subject lands, is a 1-story commercial plaza with convenience-type restaurants and lower density residential and mixed-use development opposite North Service Road. Next slide, please. So as I noted before, the surrounding area is undergoing a fair bit of a change as it's identified as an area for growth in the town. Immediately surrounding the site are 3 recently approved or under construction developments. The first one, number 1, is 4 Windward Drive, slightly northwest of the subject lands. The development there was approved in 2021 and contains 2 mixed-use podium-style developments at 12 and 19 stories, with townhouse units and permissions for hotel and commercial uses. Number 2 on the slide is 10 Windward Drive. And that's located directly opposite the subject site and is currently nearing completion. This development contains a 20-story building with 206 units plus 27 townhouses around the perimeter of the site, as well as some ground floor commercial uses. The number 3 is 13 Windward Drive, and this is east of the subject land, and it's fully built out. Development consists of a 5-story office building abutting the QEW and 3 residential buildings ranging in height from 4 to 10 stories. Next slide, please. So in terms of process, I know Michaela touched upon it. So we had the pre-consultation back in, I thought it was May, but I think she said July. It's all good. In December, we submitted our applications. Notice of complete was given on January 6th. We made sure notice signs were posted on January 11th. We received our first round of comments from the town on February 17th, and then we held our public open house on February 27th. After that, we provided a resubmission to the town, which is in with the town, and we're waiting for feedback on that resubmission. And then we're here today for a statutory public meeting. What we're hoping to see in the future is another round of comments from our resubmission, and then hopefully a third and final submission, and then what I'm hoping to see is a recommendation report in front of you, hopefully before the summer break. Next slide, please. So in terms of the proposal overview, the application we've submitted proposes a 10-story mixed-use building with 121 residential units. And as Michaela had pointed out, it has 1,926 square meters of employment commercial units, and that's primarily on the first floor, as well as a partial second floor. The total lot coverage on the site is 45%. The setbacks to the portion of the building at grade are 1.03 meters at the front yard abutting Windward Drive, 7.88 meters to the rear yard abutting the QE, excluding the 14-meter MTO setback, and 10 meters for the interior side yards. We thought that we needed a site-specific to address the below-grade parking structure, but in just speaking before this public meeting, it might not necessarily be required. So subject to further discussions with planning staff, we may remove that, that additional bylaw provision that we're requesting. Next slide, please. So due to the property's adjacency to the QEW, there's a 14-meter MTO setback. You can see it kind of dashed and taking up the southern parking stalls. So that's required along the rear property line, so no structures or contributing parking spaces are permitted within that area. What we're proposing is parking along the surface around the building, as you can see, and as well as 2 levels of below-grade parking underneath the building. So in total, what we're going to have is 250 contributing parking spaces proposed, including 12 accessible plus 57 bicycle parking spaces. Out of that 250 contributing parking spaces, 58 will be surface parking, 29 of those are contributing spaces, 7 of which are accessible, and then there will be 29 additional non-contributing spaces, which are those spaces that you see at the southern end of the lot, because they're within the MTO setback. Within the 29 attributable non-contributing spaces, there's also 2 accessible spaces located along the rear property abutting the QEW. Next slide, please. In terms of our official plan amendment, so the subject lands are designated residential mixed use within the town's parent official plan, which permits the proposed development as a mixed use development. The subject lands also fall within the Winston Road Neighborhood Secondary Plan, which designated as mixed use high density, permits a variety of uses and built forms, including mixed use buildings. In addition to the mixed-use high-density designation, the secondary plan also identifies an employment overlay on the lands immediately abutting the QEW, which were shown in that crosshatch that Michaela showed and we're showing. The specific policy 11.3.3.2H of the Winston Road Neighborhood Secondary Plan reserves the land for employment generating uses. As a result, we've requested an official plan amendment being sought to also allow residential uses in addition to the employment uses that you would normally see on a site like this. So while we're still providing the 1,926 square meters of GFA dedicated to employment and commercial uses on the first 2 floors, we've requested residential above that. Next slide, please. At the open house a few months back, a comment was made about the ratio of employment to residential within the employment overlay. So we've done some work working with town staff and trying to calculate some ratios to help inform council. What we were able to determine is in terms of other development ratios, we're coming in at just under 12%. 13 Windward is at 12.4%. And then we calculated the fifth wheel at 14.9%, but I'm going to flag that we were not able to get the GFA of the tower components. So that percentage is only based on the townhouses and the 3-story podium. So when you factor in the fact that there's going to be all these residential towers, it would bring that percentage down. We're expecting closer to 10%. Next slide, please. So the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, the lands are subject to the town's zoning bylaw 14-45, which zones the lands as neighborhood development, which does not permit the development as proposed. That's more of a zone standard that just recognizes what's on the site today with the anticipation that somebody would bring forward a zoning bylaw amendment implementing the official plan direction. So as such, we've requested a zoning bylaw amendment to amend the site's zoning to mixed-use high density consistent with the OP designation with site-specific provisions to address setbacks and the various things, some additional uses, setbacks, and a standardized parking rate, which we'll get into. So within the mixed-use high-density zone, as Michaela had pointed out, there's a variety of uses, including residential, commercial, prestige employment uses that are permitted. So in order to ensure the long-term viability of employment and commercial units, we've identified some additional uses that have been requested, specifically accessory showroom, clinic, convenience store up to a max of 464 square meters, fitness studio, a food store also up to a max of 464 square meters, and a pharmacy. Next slide, please. In addition to the uses, 6 site-specific zoning provisions have been applied for in order to accommodate the proposed mixed-use development. So the first thing that we've asked for is a reduction in the minimum front yard from 2 meters to 1 meter. This is to accommodate architectural pillars located along the front facade. So it's not that we're bringing the building within 1 meter, it's just that we have these architectural features. Based on our review, we didn't think that they were exempt from the bylaw setback, so we've asked for a small adjustment to 1 meter to allow for these pillars to be incorporated, which helps enhance the variation in the building facade that you see along Windward. The second thing that we asked for was an interior side yard setback from 4.5 meters to 0.8 meters to allow for below grade parking structure. Again, we'll have a discussion with staff about that. It sounds like to me that some of these setbacks required that were specific to the below grade parking structure may not actually be required. And we'll just continue to work with staff on that to make sure that we have the bylaw crafted in front of council in the proper way so that it can see this development happen. The reason that we were asking for that reduction is due to floor plates, the size of our floor plates due to the loss of the site area as a result of that 14-meter setback. So at the back, you essentially lose the 14 meters because the MTO doesn't allow anything in that, and that created a smaller building area, which needed to adjust our floor plates, so we had to adjust for setbacks and things of that nature. The next thing that we asked for was a reduction in the minimum rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 2 meters to accommodate, again, the below grade parking structure, so we'll talk to staff about that and make sure if it is required. And again, that was similar to the rationale behind the MTO's 14-meter setback. So we have a smaller footprint to play with, so we were just trying to max out what we can below grade. So this is all below grade setbacks that we're talking about. An increase in the maximum permitted building width from 60 meters to 72 meters. And again, this is to account for the reduction in the usable lot area. So we weren't able to get that depth that we wanted because we know that parking is a concern for council, and we wanted to make sure we had enough perimeter parking. And we had to make sure that the drive aisle to access the perimeter parking was outside of that MTO setback. So in order to make sure that that all works, we had to decrease our depth of our floor plate, so we made it a little bit longer. So that's why we're asking for 72 from 60 meters. And then the last thing that we're asking for is the fifth thing we're asking for is a standardized parking rate of 1 parking space per 28 square meters of GFA dedicated to employment or commercial uses, and 1.5 spaces per residential unit, inclusive of visitor parking. This amendment will ensure that regardless of the use, so if you have a ground floor pharmacy that just doesn't do well and has to leave and then it becomes a gym, we can have that interchange of tenants without having to consistently have to come back for parking minor variances. The last thing we're asking for is a slight reduction in the required number of accessible spaces from 13 to 12, and that's because we actually have more than that, but there's 2 of them that are identified in the non-contributing accessible spaces provided within the MTO setback. And all the other spaces are located close to the building and entrances and access points. Next slide, please. In terms of the parking ratios, another question that was raised at our open house was how our proposed parking rate compares to the standard bylaw requirements if a standard rate wasn't applied. So our site is proposing 250 parking spaces plus 29 non-contributing spaces. So if you just look at the 250 parking spaces, you see on the chart above you in the presentation slide, the zoning bylaw, based on the breakdown of development and time of use, would require a maximum of 216 parking spaces. So based on the bylaw requirement of, and peak times, because it's a mixed-use building, the maximum anticipated number of parking spaces that would be required is 216, whereas we're providing 250. So the proposed standardized parking rate would essentially be providing more parking than what the bylaw typically requires. Next slide, please. In terms of our studies, as part of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, the following studies were prepared and submitted in support of our applications. Planning justification report, tree preservation plan and arborist report, a shadow study, an urban design brief, functional servicing report, transportation impact study, noise impact study, a phase 1 environmental site assessment, and a stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment. So all of these studies are available on the town's website, or if you reach out to the town planner. Next slide, please. These are some conceptual renderings, and what we tried to do is from the ones Michaela had, we've enhanced them a little bit just to show surrounding area development a little bit more prominently so that you can see how it will contextually fit. So there's the 2 conceptual renderings for the proposed development they take from Windward Drive and the southeast corner of the lot. The design is subject to change, and that'll be enhanced through detailed design through the subsequent site plan approval, assuming that we have a positive recommendation for official plan and zoning bylaw. So the design of the building isn't baked. It can fluctuate with site plan approval. Next slide. And that's pretty much it. So at this time, I would welcome any questions or comments from the council, and thank everyone for allowing us the opportunity to present tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Oz. We have no registered delegates, so questions from council. Councillor Sharwell.
Through Mayor Jordan, thank you. So I have just some comments and some things I'd like discussed a little bit. Mainly my issues are with the comments and response matrix. I feel a lot of it's lacking. So the first one is the transportation impact study. My understanding is it was the data that you've provided, I think it was by Croziers, is from December 2020, correct?
I believe that's correct, yes.
Okay, so 3-year-old data, during a lockdown, and I think the hours didn't really give a whole lot of information as far as when people are usually traveling. So if there's a way that we could maybe get data that's updated, because now people are moving and, back at work and stuff, and during peak hours would be great. So that's one thing. The second note would be, so I had noticed in some of the notes here, it said it'd be missing information. It'd say nothing was provided, no note was provided on the first submission. Does that mean, so just process-wise, if there was no comment, do you go back to them like for a second submission, or how does that work?
So do you mean in terms of if a department or agency didn't provide comments?
Yes.
So what happens is we take the comments received, we address those in a resubmission, that goes to the town and they circulate to all the agencies and departments again. So even if they didn't have comments the first time, they could have comments the second time. And right now our second submission is out for commenting right now.
Okay, so some of these that are missing a comment from the first submission.
Could catch in the second, yes.
Okay,
And that's
so-
happened plenty. We've had it catch on the 5th. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, so if we have updates, that would be good. Section 8.6 for the archaeological component, archaeological potential, it says that Stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment has been submitted to MCM for review. A copy of the acknowledgement letter will be submitted to the town once received. So I'm assuming that we'll have this letter before we're voting on this at council, correct?
I
Yes?
want to say yes.
Okay.
I will find out from our archaeological consultant.
Okay, perfect. And the last one is to do with accessible parking.
Yes.
So I know we just, we were talking about some of these issues last week with human rights, and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act is obviously important that we're,
AODA,
yes, that we're following that to a T. And I found that the note here, you had gone to the Harrington consultants to give their opinion on that, and nothing was provided, which is disappointing. So I would hope that if we could somehow have the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee in Niagara, it's 6 municipalities, if they could discuss this and provide some comment back to you, that would be great. Is that possible? Can we do that?
I think it's a,
Okay.
Yeah, that's our peer reviewer, and Donna Harrington actually works for the town
Okay.
to do the review. Specifically with regard to accessible parking standards, our zoning bylaw is significantly more restrictive than the AOD standards. Based on 250 parking spaces, the requirement would be to provide a minimum of 7 accessible parking spaces. Our zoning bylaw requires 13. Because it's a flat rate that we require, whereas the AODA standard is a sliding rate. So the bigger the parking lot, the lower the ratio is for the number of accessible parking spaces you're required to provide. So the proposal is 5 more than the minimum required by the AODA standard.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. That's it for my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Howe.
Through you, Mayor. Excuse me. The employment areas, is that strictly going to be the first floor? Because I'm trying to relate 1,900 square meters.
it's all of the first floor, and it's going to be partially the second floor. So what we're hoping to see is office spaces on the portion that's going to be employment on the second floor. But the first floor, we're anticipating either it'll be employment uses or commercial uses. So you might get little shops and restaurants, but you might also get a clinic or something like that.
Okay, so ideally, it's going to be employment in the first 2 floors?
Correct.
And then residential after that? You said 121 residential units?
Correct.
Have you got a rough idea of the makeup, like 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms?
We haven't entirely landed on the mix, but I would suggest, sorry.
I'm sorry, maybe the architect could come up and,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. To answer your question, we haven't solely determined the mix right yet, but I would expect that about 10% 3-bedroom, 60% 2-bedroom, 15% 1, and then a smattering of bachelors.
And so 121, if the 3 bedrooms, 10%, I'm just trying to think. In 250 total parking spaces, I'm trying to relate it a little bit.
250 total parking spaces with the employment commercial as well, yes.
Okay. Then I'm probably really cynical when I ask this question, but you know the area better than I do. What are we going to do for the overflow parking? Where's it going to go? Because there's going to be a lot of competition out there on the street for a couple of parking spaces when the overflow hits.
Where the way that we've got the parking spaces aligned is 1.5 spaces per unit. And then we have a standardized rate of 1/28. So one of the things that I showed was a slide that we've determined based on the bylaw requirement, assuming a particular mix of mainly retail or office type users, you'll have that split timing of when the prime time is for parking. Based on our analysis, we're providing 250 spaces. The bylaw typically, if you were going to go use by use, is about 216. We think we've accommodated the overflow on our site. That doesn't even include the MTO parking at the back. So we're only talking about the parking that we're providing required, assuming the MTO at some point will widen the QEW and will take out that row of parking, the 29 spaces on the south side. So we're actually providing, with that MTO, 279 spaces, whereas we're figuring that you need about 216.
Okay, so that 29 is in addition to?
It's in addition to, and it's above and beyond what we think is above and beyond what we're providing for parking here.
Thank you.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. So the rendering that we have, I don't know if Katie could put it up or not, but there doesn't seem to be any amenity space there. It's hard to tell from what we received because we didn't receive any kind of floor plans or anything like that, but, and also no balconies. Is that by design? That seems unusual for residential units in this area.
Perhaps in this area, it's not common. Is it uncommon to not have balconies? No. Again, our architect is here. We do have amenity space. We have indoor and outdoor amenity space. I don't know if you want to speak to amenity or balconies.
I think part of the amenity space was the second floor, right? On the second floor, it was partially commercial or office and partially amenity space. I meant like outdoor amenity space, nothing?
There is an outdoor amenity space on the podium on the second level, facing to the south. There'll be a significant hedge on that, and then there's an adjoining indoor space on the second level that attaches to that. And then...
Okay, so thank you. And I know these are site plan questions, but we don't get to see the site plan anymore. So, and these are questions that for me are important, so I'm going to ask them now. That second floor outdoor amenity space that's south facing, do you think that that's a wise design? Because you're, I don't know, a couple dozen meters from the QEW, putting amenity space on the second floor adjacent to 6-lane highway, that's the design that you guys finished up with?
We've been going back and forth with the noise consultant to ensure that we can do that in such a way that it's a useful and enjoyable space, most importantly. So between various plantings and glass barriers as well, part of the trade-off was, I think, outdoor amenity spaces always invariably do better on the south side of the building where it's sunny. There's just, if we were to tuck it into a pocket on the north side, it would be gray most of the time. And we know it just wouldn't get the utilization. So it's a bit of a trade-off in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a shadow, any shadow images for, because on the north, the building is as far north as you could get, actually further north than you can get, because you've asked for a reduction of to 1 meter, I guess, but that is for the pillars, and I understand that, but do we have a shadow impact study for the townhomes that are right across the street from there that we can show, just so we can get an idea of the impact that this is going to have on the buildings that are currently being built or just finishing up building across the street?
We didn't have a shadow impact study that was part of the presentation here. We did look at that though, and what we did, I guess, it kind of goes back to trade-offs, right? So if we set the building back, then we'd have to put in the parking forward at Windward. And we didn't think that that was the right pedestrian environment that you would want along Windward. So what we did is we brought the building forward so that you have that activity and interchange of space and interchange of play along Windward to help activate the space. It's a 10-story building, and I don't believe that you're going to have adverse shadow impacts. Like, will there be shadows? Of course, it's a new 10-story building, but is it going to be adverse shadow impacts? And I don't think there is.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mayor. The bottom left image up there, well, both of the images show significant trees. Are those trees we're going to actually see on the site, or are those just trees for the drawing? Because, well, first of all, the bottom left one is trees that are across the road. Half of those trees are not even on the property that's being illustrated. So, I mean, you're giving the other developer quite the benefit of the doubt there. But I just, from a streetscape perspective, I think that significant tree plantings are important here. Is there enough space in the, on the side of the street there? Because, you know, there's a reduced setback. Is there enough space to put trees in front of this building?
We believe that in working with the town comes site plan, they're going to require certain streetscape requirements, and we're going to make sure that we're doing that, including having trees along the street. So we're anticipating that we will have street trees. It'll be in the public right away, and that's part of that streetscape. But again, that's a site plan thing. What we were trying to do is just not provide you, if we just did the zoning parameters for the presentation, it would be just a void building. And really, we were trying to show you what it could look like. Because otherwise, we would just have a box and just setting zoning parameters. So I know what you're asking. Are we going to have landscaping? It's going to be a requirement of the town that we have a landscape plan, street trees, all of that at site plan once we have the zoning.
Okay, through you, Mayor, and that's fine, but the drawings should be honest, and it looks to be like the one, the top right, where those trees look like they're in the middle of the parking lot, so I don't know, like, you know, it's
actually on the east side, like, that's the east side landscape strip.
Okay.
So we expect that there will be trees there, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not trying to not be honest.
No,
Okay.
But sometimes people present something that's really pretty, because putting trees there obviously makes it look nicer, right? But I want it to be an accurate depiction of what we're going to actually see there.
Fair, that's a fair point. Thank you.
I'm not questioning,
It's okay.
you know, I hope you don't misunderstand.
It's okay.
Geologically, you talked about the reduced setback underground. Will it have an impact on the ability of the adjacent property owner to develop their property with the reduced setback, I guess? Because when you know, those setbacks are, although I agree with you that they're meant to be above ground so that they don't have a visual impact and, you know, and other things like that, and below ground they're probably less significant. I just want to make sure that that's not going to have an impact on the neighboring property's ability to do the same thing that you're doing.
I don't believe it will. I've done developments in major cities, and we've had, we were the last ones to the table, and there was an underground structure already built, and we had to just do, you know, specific shoring and retaining of whatever you have to do on your side of the wall. So I don't see that being an issue.
Okay, let me make sure I asked them all. Sorry. My last question My last question, Mayor, through you, was actually for our planning staff, and it's about the process. So and this isn't for this meeting because this meeting's already started, but Ms. Bray, you mentioned the delegates have to be registered. Is that for the Zoom portion of the meeting? Okay, so people can just still show up for a public meeting, traditional in-person. It's registering for online to make sure that everything is done smoothly. I just wanted to make sure that the process is still open and easy for people to access, and that's it. Thanks, Your Worship.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for the architect, actually. And I wonder if he could detail what kind of green infrastructure he's using in this building.
Okay, I think these are more questions that we generally approach during the SPA, but we're happy to speak to these. So I think first and foremost, we'll be shooting for quite an efficient building just from an insulation perspective. Most of the buildings we've been doing recently, we've been finding the most efficient way to deploy resources to come up with a green solution is just to insulate it really, really well. Secondly, we'll be doing the extensive landscape areas. We'll be retaining the water on site, rainwater on site for irrigation purposes. I think we'll be having some green roof on the upper roof, probably using a low albedo parking surface to reduce the heat island effect from the asphalt on the site.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Bradzi.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. I just wanted to touch back to the amount of space of commercial to residential. And I understand that you guys are compliant to some of the developments that we've done in the past in the immediate area. The reason I made that request originally was kind of just wanting to see that increased from what we've approved or previous council has approved. And I just want to know if you took any conceptualized looks at increasing that.
Through your worship, and I almost fell, we did. One of the things that we were finding challenging was parking, actually. When you start eliminating the second floor residential and replacing it with non-residential space, the parking requirement starts to jump up significantly. And instead of being able to tout that we have a lot of that overflow on top of overflow, we were finding that you needed a lot more parking. So understanding, understanding that the original question was to see how we were comparing to others, which I think we're generally aligned, if not we're in the middle of the pack. The next major thing I heard was parking. And so what I can say is we're providing more parking than most. We're not asking for a reduction, we're just asking for a standard rate so that we can interchange tenants if we lose them. And we are, and we're providing, I think, an appropriate amount of space on the first and second floor. The other thing that's a challenge is, and I know this just from experience, is if you add additional non-res space on additional floors, there's literally next to no market absorption for that kind of development right now. Even the office building beside us, that building has literally, I think, like a tenant per floor. And when you go in, because it's all glass on the inside, our client actually went in there today, and he was looking, and you could see like 3/4 of each floor was empty. So again, it's one of those things where you want to have usable space. We think we have the right mix. We worked with staff to get the mixed, and I think we got it right.
Okay. There is actually a pretty large company moving into that building coming up. But my next question was, what considerations have been made towards energy efficiency with the building to date?
I'll let the architect.
The installation of the building.
Yeah, I'll let the architect answer.
Maybe on the mechanical side of things.
I think it's a little premature for the mechanical. We haven't really zeroed in on that system. It's conceivable we could go to geotech, but we're sort of seeing mixed results with that. We're doing some developments right now where the cladding of the building is actually solar panels, and it doesn't look like a solar panel, it looks like stone. So we're doing 158 unit with that right now. Looking forward to seeing how it works out. As mentioned, we'll have the low albedo parking lot. Again, a lot of insulation is really our number one best approach to making these things energy efficient right now.
That's all my questions.
Councillor DeVoley.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I didn't hear anything about whether these units will be sold or rented. Could you just clarify that for us? Or is it your plan to sell all the residential and commercial units, or are you planning to sell some, have some as rental units? What's the plan for all of this?
Through you, Your Worship, we haven't got there yet, actually. What we've been focused on is addressing the zoning comments. A condo or a rental building actually is one of the things we have not discussed yet. We've been really focused on the zoning amendment application. I think by the time we start coming forward with site plan, we'll probably have that more nailed down. And then you'll see, and we can present that to staff at site plan, part of our covering letter maybe. And then from there, but I mean, if it's a condo, then we'll have to do the requisite condo application and things of that nature. But right now, I don't think we've actually discussed ownership.
You mentioned the building next door to you as well, and that it's fairly empty at this stage, we'll say. And my concern is twofold, I guess. As soon as we get into these developments, we do like to see commercial space, but nothing is more disappointing than when commercial space is empty for long periods of time. And so as a business owner, I'm sure that concerns you too. Can you talk to me about what your plan is or what your backup plan is if you're not able to get enough commercial enterprises into the commercial side of the building?
That's actually a really good question. At no point did I think that we would not be able to lease out the ground floor. I never really thought about that. I kind of saw this as an opportunity for new like restaurant startups and just various types of, maybe service commercial users or even office users that would look for space. Smaller space too, because we've capped a lot of it to make sure that we're not competing with other areas. There wouldn't be a backup. I think that's part of the reason why we've asked for additional uses, to give us that flexibility in terms of tenancies. The idea is not to remove the non-residential space to residential. Like, that's not the intent. If at the same time, we recognize the fact that you don't want to see vacancies. But I think at the ground floor, with the amount of parking that we're providing, and given the intensity of development that we're seeing around us, I think you're going to see an influx of people. And with that influx of people, you're going to see the need for like amenities within close distance. People don't want to always drive to everywhere, right? And like, I used to live I'm not saying this is Toronto, but I used to live in Toronto, and I used to live within walking distance of a grocery store, a pharmacy, a medical clinic. I can't even count the coffee shops and restaurants. I never took my car. And I think what you want to see here, while we are providing more than enough parking, you want to see that activity. And I think that's going to come with the development, with you see more residentials and when you see more people influxed into the space, so that they don't have to drive out to, I don't know, the Costco or anything like that, but they want to stay local and have, walk their dog and grab a coffee and things of that nature. So we're expecting it to be actually pretty successful. I think we got the right mix here, and we're providing more than enough parking. If anything, I think we're overparked, but we're going to follow town and council's lead on making sure we have enough parking. But we don't have really a backup plan if it doesn't work. I think it will work. So
I would just share with you that years of experience of working with businesses, and one of the things that I traditionally find is that most business owners, including ventures like yourself, are very good at estimating the cost to build the capital property, very good at estimating, the operating costs for the building going forward. But revenue takes a crystal ball, unfortunately. Have you done any market studies or anything like that to establish, why you think this commercial residential mix will work for you? Or what are you relying on in this?
I believe our clients, the owners, they have costing consultants that have talked to them about the mix. One of the things that was a sticking point was how much non-residential we have to provide. But we do think that what we're expecting is some of that second floor space might even be, live work, or maybe someone lives in the building and takes up a commercial or an employment use for a hair studio or something like that, so they don't have to travel and things of that nature. So I believe that our clients do have costing consultants that have been helping them along the way, which is how we got to where we got to with the building size and the unit count. In terms of actual, have I ever seen it? No, but that's outside of my purview.
Yes, and I hear you, and I think what you've just sort of reemphasized for me is that most new business ventures, I'll call it that, are really good at costing it out, hire consultants and so on, but it's determining the market that is much harder. And not, the market in this case is everything from, can you sell all the residential units, what's the price range and so on. But likewise, the commercial units, like where you're going to draw on for those and so on, right? And I realize that's really your concern and not ours as a town, that it's your business venture and you want it to be successful, and I do too for you. But my concern always as a councillor when I look at our town is to really hope that people have really given this some serious thought, and that we don't have buildings sitting out in that particular area with lots of empty commercial space. It's not good for a lot of reasons, right?
No, that's
and so we do want to encourage commercial development in our town for sure. But that's why I'm asking these questions, just to make sure that you've really given it some serious thought and are able to fill it. I really want you to be successful along those lines.
Thank you for the comments.
Councillor Korstanji.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So quick question, out of the 121 units, how many are going to be fully accessible?
I think our OBC requirements are about 15%. So, and that's 15% spread across all the different unit types. So it's not all predominantly the bachelors or something like that. So.
Perfect, thank you. And another question, if you have, whether you rent or you sell, I'm assuming there's going to be a condo management company dealing with condo fees and things like that. If that is the case, how are you going to, some of the problem with these situations is that a management board will stop residents from parking in visitor and not allow it, which then actually decreases the parking spots that are allowed for the actual residents. They'll basically say you are not allowed to park in visitor parking whatsoever, which then is going to drastically eliminate that parking. So do you have a plan in place to ensure that that doesn't happen, so that you do have the excess parking?
I hear what you're saying. I think what I've seen in the past is, again, it depends on whether you rent or sell, which we don't have, we're not there yet. If it becomes a condo, then you build things into the condo doc so that the condo corp has to follow the declaration of the condo corporation. We can build things into the condo declaration if it is a for sale building. If it's a rental building, then it's run by a property management typically. And then I think that's just providing guidance from ownership to the property management on what restrictions, if any, there are for parking, because I would anticipate that visitor and commercial will probably just have a lot of interplay with them. And again, keeping in mind that we have the extra 29 spaces at the back, which I know the MTO says you can't use them, but we're having them, and we've been looking for plans where they're extending the QEW northbound, and we haven't seen it. So we don't see it as a problem, but point taken, and we'll make sure that depending on ownership tenure, that'll be addressed.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. So 3.3 in the comment matrix from Public Works talks about turn lane changes and some other, we don't get to see the traffic study. I guess when this neighborhood was being designed, this was not part of the plan, obviously. You know, it was supposed to be employment use, and the 100, whatever number of units it is, was not part of the decision-making process. So I guess, what's the impact on Windward is the question that I have. It's a small, narrow road. It has a curve in it, you know. What does the traffic study say about the impact on Windward Road is my first question.
My understanding, and our traffic consultant is here, my understanding is that the Windward Drive, based on the surrounding background developments that we knew were coming at the time, is able to accommodate the traffic coming in, and including the traffic from our site. So it looks like it should have capacity. It should be able to handle it.
Okay, and I don't want to assume, but I'm assuming because there's no mention of wastewater and other kind of infrastructure. If no news is good news, I'm guessing on that. We're good to, okay. So obviously there's no parkland as part of this. So through you, Mayor, to staff, I guess, are there community benefits that are going to be part of this proposal? Is it community benefits and cash in lieu? How does this work? I've never dealt with one like this before, so I don't know if you can answer that yet, or if that's something that's going to need to be determined.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor. We take land where there is a planned park, and our secondary plan explicitly says that in this neighborhood, we will be taking land along the waterfront, and all other developments will be contributing cash towards the acquisition of waterfront land. So that's the strategy in this neighborhood. So for this particular development, we would be taking cash in lieu of parkland dedication in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act.
And thank you. And so there is no need for a community benefit as there would have been another.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, community benefits, like it used to be Section 37 in the Planning Act, community benefits now, the community benefits now are like development charges. We are in the process of hiring a consultant to do a community benefits study. So the community benefits study will determine, based on certain features of a building, typically its height, what community benefits based on, it'll be like a development charge. So we have to identify what features we require within a specific geographic area, and then what community benefits will be contributable from any particular project towards that community benefit, similar to development charges.
Through you, Mayor, so it's to be determined then?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Right now, you have to have a community benefits charge.
No, because obviously,
based on the new regulations.
Even though there is no parkland on site, and the proximity to the lakefront and to the work that we're doing down there, including some that's starting this year, a contribution to that would help improve that and make it a greater amenity space for the people that are living in this building. So there's a good justification for community benefit on this plan. I just want to make sure that there is, this development's contributing to the park that they're going to be enjoying. That's all.
Yeah, community benefits or community benefit charge would be features that wouldn't be covered by development charges and that wouldn't be covered by parkland dedication requirements. So they'd be above and beyond.
But will there be?
In this particular case, we'll be taking cash in lieu of parkland.
But no
So,
community benefits?
In accordance with our requirements of our secondary plan. But community benefits, it depends on when the project comes on board and what the status of our community benefits study is. And the establishment of community benefits charges that would be attributable to any development subsequent to the adoption of the bylaw. So the bylaw would need to be adopted similar to a bylaw that's required to be adopted for a development charge.
So we better get moving on those community benefits.
We're moving on.
So, all right. And the last one was regarding wind. This is a high wind area. It is going to be now creating sort of a wind tunnel between two large buildings. Has a wind study been done, and is there any, obviously the south side amenity space would have to have some sort of noise attenuation, which would probably act as wind mitigation too, but is it going to have an impact on the townhomes wind-wise on Windward? It's actually called Windward, so.
So to clarify, we had gone through the prepared and submitted reports. A wind study, I don't believe, was a requirement from staff. We did do a shadow study, though, just because you were asking before about the shadows. We did do a formal shadow study that was reviewed by staff.
No, and the shadow study wasn't for me because you showed it to me in the presentation.
we showed it before.
Early on. I just wanted people to see it, so because, so some of the questions that I ask here are not for me, just to be clear. They're so that people can have a better understanding of the process and what's happening, and that's why I asked the shadow study question, because I wanted to be able to put up a picture of it and show the impact, that's all. Thanks.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, I may be able to contribute a little bit to that, the wind question. It's something that we typically ask for through site plan review because there are detailed mitigating measures that you could implement with barriers and minor design tweaks that could bring areas, common amenity areas as an example, to ensure that those are usable for the users with acceptable wind levels.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Seeing no further questions from council, I'd like to thank everyone for your participation in the public meeting. The consultants and staff will take back all feedback. Please contact staff at planning@grimsby.ca if you have any additional comments or questions about the proposal after this evening. The public meeting is closed. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.